That fight did not go the way a lot of people expected. I mean, don't get me wrong. Crawford came in like 7, 8, 9-1 favorite, depending on when you caught the odds, and he did come out with the victory. So in that sense, it turned out the way a lot of people thought it would. But man, that was a close fight. Madrimov came up. He showed up. He came to win. I think it's safe to say that we learned a few things from this fight. Number one, Terence Crawford has a chin. I mean, we already knew that he could take a shot, but he went in there last night and he took probably the biggest shots from the biggest puncher that he had taken in his career, and he never wavered. He never staggered. I mean, there was a couple times when he got caught with some right hands in there and they were clean, and he just ate them and kept it moving. Number two, Madrimov is highly skilled. I mean, he came in there and he fought the guy that is pretty much viewed as the number one pound for pound fighter, and he pushed him all the way to the limit. And he was doing it with more than just a natural size advantage. What we saw last night wasn't because of the fact that he was just a naturally bigger person than Bud. That dude has a lot of skills. Number three, Terence Crawford is as good as advertised. Obviously, he was on everybody's number one pound for pound list. Obviously, everybody had him super high after knocking out Errol Spence. But now this man just became a champion, a world champion in 4 weight divisions. That puts him in rarefied air. Even in an era when we have watered down champions, even in an era, the 4-belt era, when there's all kinds of people that are able to finagle ways to go snatch up a belt, the man did it in 4 weight divisions. And there's not many people who can make that claim. And number 4, weight class exists for a reason. I think based off of what we saw, we can pretty much stop the talk of Crawford versus Canelo. Look, I know in the post-fight that it was brought up and he mentioned it and he said that he wants it for 2 reasons, 1 being the legacy and 2 being the payday. We were all aware of that beforehand. But part of the reason that we were talking about it is because we really, truly thought that it could be competitive. We really, truly thought that even though Terence Crawford would be an underdog going into that fight, that there was a possibility that he was going to be able to come out with the victory. But now with what we saw at 154 pounds, do we realistically think that this man should be jumping to 168? And Canelo's come out in the past and said that 160 isn't an option for him. He can't make that anymore. It's like, dude, what do you think would happen if Canelo would have fought Madrimov? Good. Yes, it's true. Terence Crawford got the victory. And yes, it's true. We believe that Canelo would get the victory as well. But it would be the difference in the way in which those fights were fought. You know, Terence Crawford said it, I wanted 2, maybe 3 times in the post-fight interview. He mentioned how strong Madrimov is. Canelo wouldn't be talking about how strong he was, because Canelo's been in there with way bigger and way stronger guys, and he was able to handle them. Look, I don't think Terence Crawford's legacy needs Canelo on it. I don't. If he was able to go out there and he was able to get that victory, man, we'd all be having to take our hats off to the man and really, truly talk about where he belonged when we were talking about all-time great fighters. If he was able to go up and make that jump. But the fact that he's not doesn't take anything away from what he's already accomplished. He doesn't need Canelo's name on his resume, man. Terence Crawford has achieved great things. Back to this fight, right? A little bit away from that side note, but back to this fight. Going in, we know that Bud's traditionally a slow starter, right? We know going into fights, he's going to give away the first round, maybe the second round. It's because the man's a natural counterpuncher, right? He wants to go in there and he wants to really, truly analyze what you're doing. He wants to see where your weight is, how you're holding your hands, how you're going to react to certain things. So he doesn't commit, doesn't throw a lot of punches, doesn't really put himself out there all that much. And then typically what we see is by the 3rd, 4th round, he gets going. By that 3rd, 4th round, he starts to turn up the pressure. He starts to crank things up, starts to apply what he's learned in those first couple rounds and starts to actually execute on that. So when we come out in this one, first round, we see it start slow. Second round, we see it going a little bit slow. It doesn't really, it doesn't really seem out of the ordinary. Nobody's really thinking about it crazy. But I'll tell you this, watching that first round, instantly, I knew right away that it was going to be a different story. Instantly, I knew right away that this man was going to present trouble for Crawford. I said it going into this fight. I made like a first thoughts on it a couple months back, and I said Madrimov is highly skilled. He's going to be able to go in there and he's going to be able to do things that are going to give Crawford trouble. He's not some pushover. He's not some bum. Crawford isn't just going to move up to 154 and just snatch this belt up crazy. Okay, the only reason Crawford was a 7, 8, 9-1 favorite was because of all the buzz. It was because of the public. The bookies know that they could just go out there and they could just smash that side, that money line, and people were still going to throw money on Terence Crawford, even though he didn't necessarily justify being that big of a favorite. And it isn't because of how good he is or isn't, right? We know the man's awesome. It's because of how good Madrimov is. And he showed that right away in that first round. Even though it was slow, even though there wasn't much going on, even though you could feel the crowd getting restless, you could see right away the foot feints, the level changes. You could see the way that he was using that right, his lead hand, that left hand, and he was constantly moving it around. He was showing so much misdirection. The way he came out there and he became the aggressor and he was on the front foot and he started to walk Bud down. Those were very solid moves. That was very good stuff. But I'll tell you what I think was the key for Madrimov in this one, right? The key, the biggest part of his game plan Everybody knows Bud's a natural counterpuncher. Everybody knows that if you go out there and you let Terence Crawford get into this rhythm and he starts getting these counterpunches off, man, it's going to be a short night for you. So what he did was he forced the counterpuncher to act first. He didn't allow Terence Crawford to dictate the rhythm and the pace and everything else based off of his counterpunching. So he became the aggressor. He walked forward constantly. He was always on that front foot. He was always walking forward. Terence Crawford was always moving backwards or using lateral movement. Okay? But it's not just that. All kinds of pressure fighters come in and work behind the jab on the front foot and end up getting smoked. He came forward and applied pressure and didn't use the jab. Didn't use the jab. Now, you can make the argument that his jab was nullified based on the fact that Terence Crawford was in that southpaw stance. I get it, but he didn't try to force it. He didn't try to use it. And he didn't need to build his game off of it. Right? I've said so many times in the past that you can go a long way with a jab. You build your game off the jab, man, you can go a long way with it. But if somebody figures out how to take your jab away, a lot of those guys are done. They really can't do anything with off it. They can't gauge the distance anymore. They can't set up their combinations. They can't set up anything with their power shots. And I've said before, Floyd Mayweather was a master of taking away an opponent's jab. And that was it. Those guys were almost disarmed at that point. A lot of them, not everybody, but a lot of them, right? Even at the highest levels, you'll see guys that are their entire game is built around that jab. Madrimov didn't need that. So he came in, he barely threw that jab. Little bits here and there, but his game wasn't built off of it. His pressure didn't need it. He was coming forward, he was being the aggressor, and he wasn't throwing punches, which was forcing Bud to act, right? It would force Bud to throw the jab. Right, Bud actually dominated. He won the jabbing battle for the night, but was forcing him to jab, and that was allowing Madrimov to counter. He was countering with that right hand. That right hand was his main weapon all night. Those counter punches that he was shooting from all kinds of angles, going overhand with it, going straight with it. Great stuff. The adjustment that Bud made was he countered the counter. So what we started to see was Madrimov coming forward and being the aggressor, Bud throwing a jab, Madrimov trying to counter that, and then Bud, you trying to take a half step back, trying to come back on an angle, trying to counter with a right hand, trying to get out of the way and go get that left uppercut going. And we started to see the chess match develop with that sort of a pattern. But the next wrinkle in that, or the next evolution of that, was it became very hard for Bud to land those counters because of the fact that Madrimov has so many defensive movements built into his patterns, right? He's not one of these guys that needs to go out there and try to chain offense and defense together, because you can see that he kind of works that. And what I mean by that was, think about when he counters with this right hand. He throws the right hand, and immediately after it, he'll build in a defensive movement. He'll slip underneath. He'll walk. He'll go through with his right foot and then get underneath to create an angle and try to get on the other side. He'll back out right away. He'll keep the left hand up and dip to the left. He'll do so many things that he automatically, by instinct, does when he throws that right hand. It makes it very difficult to counter him. Right? Part of the basis on that countering is that you're going to know where your opponent's going to be. So he throws it. The typical guy's going to throw that right hand. His head's going to come in on that center line or slightly off that center line. But as soon as he starts to throw that right hand, there's not going to be much defensive movement after that until that movement's complete. And that's what creates a great opportunity for a counterpuncher like Terence Crawford to go in there and catch you with that right hook. As soon as you get caught with the right hook, you're sitting duck for the left hand. Right? We've seen him do it time and time again. But when you build in defensive movements into your punching patterns, Lomachenko, off the top of my head, is another guy who does it. We've seen Floyd Mayweather do it here and there, but that's not really his game. But man, Madrimov did it so well. And when you build those defensive movements in, it makes it very difficult for a counterpuncher to get his shots off. And he was frustrating Bud with it. Now, don't get me wrong. Bud won this fight, okay? And he did it by winning the battle of the jabs. He did it by going down to the body very effectively. And he did it really by, in a lot of ways, being unpredictable himself. Right? He didn't go out there and he didn't have any signature punch. Like I said, the signature punch for Madrimov was that right hand. He was doing a lot of damage with it. He was landing clean shots. Bud didn't have a signature punch. He was trying a lot of different things. The right hook landed at times. That step back left uppercut landed at times. He definitely won the battle of the jabs, but he didn't dominate the fight with the jab. He didn't need the jab to set up other things, but he used it very effectively at times. There was a lot that he was doing out there, man. It speaks to how good he is. Right, it speaks to his skill set, because it was funny. Sergio Mora said it during the broadcast. He's like, Bruce Lee, Terence Crawford is like the Bruce Lee of boxing, in the sense that he's so adaptable. He flows like water. It's hard to prepare for him because he can go out there and he can do everything. He's got everything in his tool belt. He can win on the outside with the jab. He can get on the inside and be rough and tumble. He can go to the body well. He can counter. He can lead. Anything that he needs to do, he's got that ability to bring that out in that fight. He can adapt mid-fight and bring all of those things out. So whatever he was planning for, whatever his game plan was, whatever he was he can always adapt. In the post-fight interview, he said, look, Madrimov was countering more than we thought. He was trying to counter like I do. Madrimov didn't throw jabs like we thought. Madrimov wasn't getting aggressive and coming forward and getting off balance and putting his head in front of that knee like we thought. Those are all things that he was planning for in training camp. Those were all things that him and his team were working on, and those were all things that didn't happen. Madrimov came out there and fought a beautiful game plan, man. He fought a beautiful game plan, but he was not the better fighter and he came up short. Two of those judges had a 115, 113, and I agree with those cards. Sean Porter said, he was one of the broadcast guys and he was talking up during the fight and saying it was a blowout. I didn't really feel that. Dude, I'll be perfectly honest with you. I was worried at parts of that fight that it was going to get away from Bud. That something was going to happen and Madrimov was going to be able to get the upper hand and he was going to come out with the victory because it was close and he looked really good, especially when he was able to throw some of those clean right hands and he would completely change the rhythm of the fight for the next 5 to 10 seconds because he was catching Bud clean. Or when Bud would try to get off and he'd throw a combination and he was getting picked off and you could tell that he thought he had an opportunity and for some reason it wasn't working. Like Madrimov was strong, he was tough, he's durable, he's tricky. He uses very slight and small head movements and foot feints and foot movements to get away from punches and take the sting off of shots and stuff. Like the dude, I knew he was good going in and the dude was better than I thought, man. What can I say? Very impressed with this fight. I'm going to go back and watch it at least a few more times because there's so many little subtleties and things that I want to pick up on. But at the end of the day, it was the right hand from Madrimov that he saw a lot of success with. And it was the movement, it was the jab, it was the body work, it was the counter punching where Bud was able to succeed his success. And ultimately he was able to get, bank more rounds and get that victory. But man, and then you think after that, what's going to be next? I highly doubt we're going to see Terence Crawford move back down to 147. I think that chapter is closed for a variety of reasons. But that means he's at 154 now. And if he's not moving up, which I would highly advise that he does not move up because the only big fight moving up is going to be Canelo. Way too big for him. I don't want to see him go to 160 and challenge anybody up there. Those fights aren't a big enough name for his resume or his legacy, and those fights are not a big enough name for his checkbook to justify going up there and what I think will happen against an even bigger opponent. But if we stay at 154, what's there for him? I wish we were talking from a few years ago when we still had Charlo in the division, right? Remember the guy, Charlo, who had all the belts in 154, who went up and got smoked by Canelo, and all of a sudden he fell off the face of the map and we don't see him anymore? That's a fight I would have loved to see, right? Terence Crawford versus Charlo. Not one we're going to get now. Is it going to be Terence Crawford versus Virgil Ortiz, or Virgil Ortiz come out with the victory next week? I don't know, man. I don't know. There's options for him. And ironically enough, he went out there and beat such a beastie guy, man. Who's going to give him trouble at 154? Because he was able to go out there and beat Madrimov. And I get that Virgil Ortiz presents a whole different set of problems and a skill set and everything else. But it's all about how styles make fights. And it isn't just about the athletic ability that Madrimov has. And he is a very good athlete. And if you doubt that for 1 second, go look at the post-fight where he does a backflip. Dude does the little gymnastic where you do the cartwheel into the little half turn and then the backflip out there. You have to be an athlete to make that happen. You have to have great athletic ability to be able to do a standing backflip like that. So the man's not only a very good athlete with the eye-hand coordination and the accuracy and the power, because he throws some power shots, and the hand speed and all of that other kind of stuff that's made him incredibly successful as a boxer, but he also came in there with a great game plan. That was a great game plan for fighting a guy like Terence Crawford, man. Like he took the play away from him in so many different ways, and he did so many good things. And even though he came up short, that was kind of the way it had to be. Think about this. If he goes in there and fight Virgil Ortiz, will that style matchup make it easier for Bud? Will Virgil Ortiz be able to take what Madrimov did in this fight and then build on and implement that into his own game plan and then come out and be even more successful? Like, those are the things that we'd love, man. Is Bud going to be able to become more acclimated at the weight class of 154 and maybe get a little bit more power in his shots? Go out there and be able to do a little bit more and feel a little bit more. Who knows, right? But that's what we're here for. That's what we stick around for. That's why we watch. That's why we love it. So, man, let me know what you guys think. Were you as excited about this one as I were? Did you look at it and were you maybe possibly a little bit disappointed by the speed and the pace of it all? Did you think Bud was going to be able to go out there and get this knockout victory and Madrimov was going to get blown out the water and in essence he was the one who came out and really impressed you? And what do you think is going to be next in the legacy of Terence Crawford? Let me know.